Hi, how are you? Good. Thanks for coming to this brief lecture overview of 5 different retirement accounts. To begin with, I just want to point out that I am not a licensed financial advisor, and this is for informative purposes only. The data that I provide may or may not be up to date. I think it's fairly accurate, but by all means, you should double check this with a financial advisor before you make any moves. This lecture is simply to provide an overview of how these accounts work. It's not to provide any sort of advice or encouragement to invest. You'll have to see somebody who has a license and liability insurance for that purpose, okay? So thanks for coming. I'm going to talk about 5 different retirement vehicles today. And the first 2 are Social Security and pension plan. And the following 3 are going to be the 401k plan, which some of you may be familiar with already, the traditional IRA, and the Roth IRA. And despite what most people think about these being really complicated and confusing and hard to understand, they're very easy to understand. There are just some subtle nuances among them, but they have far more in common than they have in differences. So let's first start with the Social Security plan. The Social Security plan was enacted and has been with us since 1935. Those of you who are currently working know full well what it is, or you have some idea, because when you get your paycheck, you can see there is a deduction for that. And basically what this is a mandatory social welfare program. It's for all citizens who work, and of course it's been expanded to provide money and resources for many people who do not work. Some for very legitimate reasons that we would all agree with. Others, perhaps there might be some debate there, but it's not a political lecture, it's an informative lecture, so I'll leave that part up to you. This account is held, maintained, and managed by the United States government. So what could go wrong? $38 trillion in debt. Theoretically, there is 0 risk with Social Security. However, if the government were to become insolvent from excessive debt spending, to the tune of, let's say, $38 trillion, with a $2 trillion a year deficit from budget to budget, so we are rapidly increasing that total national debt, the resulting catastrophe would mean bankruptcy and a total loss. So a lot of people like to point out, I'll paraphrase Tom Sowell a bit here, that Social Security has never missed a payment. It's never defaulted. It's always been there for people, and that's always true, right up to the moment of collapse. So just because it's always been there and hasn't missed a payment, as they say, that means nothing. I would urge you to consider the $38 trillion worth of debt that we are in, because this is going to become more and more difficult to fund. Basically what this is, it is a retirement plan. It's really not enough for anybody to retire on. So it should be one of several vehicles if you're going to try to retire at a reasonable age, 65 or even 70 now as that age continues to increase. And basically, as you work throughout your life, they will take a little bit out of each paycheck. And then when you retire, when you reach normal retirement age, which is going to be 67, I think for me, maybe 70 by the time you get there, people are living longer. So they've had to push back the dates that you are allowed to retire at. So it was once 65, you could retire early at 62, I think a smaller amount. It would probably be 67 and maybe 64 or something like that by the time I get there, which is clearly decades away for me. It's okay, you can laugh. The way that this works is they take this out of your paycheck in small amounts, and then when you're done working and you declare retirement, then the government will start sending checks to you. It's not very much. You might get a couple $1,000s a month. The amount that you receive just depends on how much you've worked and how much you put into it over time. So if you work part-time your entire life, it's going to be a smaller amount. If you went to work at 18 and worked full-time and worked up into overtime and worked until you were 60, then it's going to be the maximum amount. So it will vary a little bit. But these dispersals are fixed and guaranteed, which means for as long as our government remains solvent. Now, Another program is the pension plan. The pension plan is, that has been with us since 1857 for New York police officers, in the private sector since 1875. So a long time. Basically what a pension plan is, it sort of reflects a different approach, which is gone. And that's why most of you don't know what a pension plan is, or maybe you've heard of it, but you don't know any details of it. So 5 decades ago, when you went to work for a company, many companies, if not the majority of them, would provide a pension plan. And what that means is, as you continue to work there over the years, over time, the company would put money into an account for you to retire. And when you reach retirement age, you can start drawing checks from that account. Now, the reason pension plans are beautiful, and also the reason why they disappeared today, is because it's very expensive for an employer to provide this. But again, it's a reflection of a different sort of contract with people in the country, between employers and employees. So most of the traditional pension plans are funded 100% by the employer. I was fortunate enough to work for an old company, UPS, with a very strong labor union, and so they have maintained an employer-funded pension plan since they started. I don't know what year they started this, but it is still going strong. So what that means is, I don't have to contribute a nickel. I never see a deduction from my paycheck. I don't have to think about it. I don't have to consult with some financial advisor and work it out and make decisions. I don't need to know anything. And I will receive a fixed amount of income when I retire based on my years of service. So the formula for UPS is $100 per month in retirement for every year of service. So I worked 20 years at UPS. So 20 times $100 each month, $2,000 a month. And the reason these are great plans is because they never expire, they never run out of money. I will continue to receive those checks for as long as I draw a breath, which is a good reason for me to rescind the DNR notice, leave me on machines for years drawing those checks, force them to pay that up. And it's really not a very good deal for the employer. It's very expensive. They have to handle everything, they pay for everything, and then they just write your checks until you die, however long that is, no limit. So these have largely disappeared because the contract, the social contract between employees and employers has changed. Somewhere in the 80s, it was decided, hey, what are we putting these pension plans together for? Let people save their own money for retirement. Why are we gifting this to them? And of course, the reason was because if you were to give 3.5 decades of the best years of your life to an employer, then it was felt, we'll say, that the employer had some obligation to take care of you when they put you out to pasture. And that was just part of the deal. Yes, you drew a paycheck when you performed work there, but also when you retired from that company, they would provide something for you to live on when you were too old to perform work anymore. And again, somewhere in the 1980s, these started to disappear because companies realized, oh, wait, we don't have to do this? Well, then why wouldn't we? The hell with them, let them save their own money for retirement. And so a lot of legacy companies will have these pension plans, but not very many newer companies. And some companies that have them today will require some contribution from the employee. And the traditional ones largely don't require anything. I never put a penny into it. I didn't need to know anything about it. I didn't make trades. I didn't talk to anybody. I just knew I would receive X amount in retirement when I retired for my years of service. So that's the pension plan. Those dispersals are guaranteed. They occur monthly, you get a monthly check. They're fixed, and then you receive them for life or until the fund goes bankrupt, which certainly could happen. Now, in part, because of the vanishing pension plans, the government came to the rescue and said, well, let's develop some programs for people to be able to save money for their own retirement since these corporations don't want to do it anymore. And so they came up with one example here, the 401k, somewhere between 1978 and 1980. And basically the 401k plan works like this. It is also funded by the employer, but only 2 to 5%. You're going to have to save the lion's share of that. So 95 to 98% of the contributions are going to come out of your paycheck, which means you're going to have to designate some significant amount of your earnings to go into your 401k. However, there are some advantages to doing this. The employer, on average, most employers, around 5% of your annual income is what they're willing to match at about 50%. So if you're making $100,000 a year and they're going to match 5% of that at 50%, that means they're going to give you $2,500, right? 5% of 100,000 is 5,000, and half of that, 50% of that, would be 2,500. So that's a 5% matching contribution, not as generous as the pension plan where they fund the whole thing, but something is better than nothing. It's better than a sharp snipping on it. The risk is held by the employee on this one. Since the account is yours, you're funding it, and it's in your name, you are responsible for all of the executive decisions around it. So you may need to meet with a financial advisor to make sure that the investments are in the correct order. You want some variance of low risk, mid risk, and high risk in there, depending on how old you are, what your circumstances are, so that you can maximize the growth. And the growth potential is typically 5 to 8% annually on that, which is not a bad return rate, 5 to 8%. But you are funding the lion's share. So when you retire, declare retirement, and you start drawing from this account, which for the 401k, I believe is 59 and a half, that's how old you have to be, you will receive a monthly check, and it's however much you want. You determine it. You may say, well, I've got $150,000 in the account, and so I have to make it last maybe 25 years, and so I don't know, a couple thousand a month is all I can take. I don't want to drain it out right away. That's up to you. Here are some advantages for 401k. If I deposit out of my paychecks, let's say I put $5,000 a year into the 401k. When I file an income tax return the following year, if I've made $50,000 the year before, but I put $5,000 of it into that 401k, I can deduct that $5,000 from my taxable income. In other words, I would only have to pay income taxes on $45,000, even though I made $50,000. The money that you put into that 401k is no longer taxed. So that's a nice little bonus, right? If you can deduct $5,000 from your AGI, your adjusted gross income, that's a fairly significant amount of reduction in tax liability every year. Don't get too comfortable with that, though, because they're not just going to give that to you for free. You get to take that deduction while you're young and saving and working toward retirement. However, when you declare retirement and tell them you want to start receiving distributions from that 401k account, if I were to ask for $1,000 a month, I'll get a check in the mail for about $840 because I now have to pay income taxes on it. So they exempted my contributions from income taxes when I was young, and I was putting into it in order to encourage me to do so, give me a little tax break, help out my family, pay some of my bills. It's not a huge lift, but it helps. However, when you retire and take distributions, that's when it will be taxed. You didn't think the government was just going to let you have the tax break forever, right? They give you a little break now, but then you pay it later. That's the idea. So this one is also very good. Currently, the maximum contribution is $23,500 per year. That's up from $23,000 last year. And if you're over the age of 50, which I myself am nowhere near, then you're allowed to add an $8,000 addition to that every year. So you would be able to put, $31,500 in there, $8,000 additional amount. Now here's the thing. That's a huge amount of money, right? There are people who don't make $23,500 a year. If you're young and you're working somewhere where you're making minimum wage or barely more than that, you might not even make that much annually. I don't know anyone who is putting nearly $24,000 a year in a maximum contribution into a 401k. In order to do that, I would have to be in the $200,000 a year range, and I would still be taking out almost 13% of my income to do that. So that's a huge number, but you could contribute some portion of that. Maybe you get to $10,000 a year or $12,000 if you could put $1,000 a month into it. I know that sounds like a lofty goal right now as you're young and not making as much money, but you'll get to the point soon where you can start adding to that. And you know, again, it's fairly stable, 5 to 8% growth. The risk is all on the employee though. Since you put your money into it and your name is on the account, it's all based on how the market is performing. So if there's a big panic and sell-off and the stock market starts going down, that means the value of your 401k account is also going to go down with the market. Because as the stock market grows, so does your 401k. The 401k that you have, all it has in it are stocks and bonds and like groups and collections of different stocks and mutual funds that are designed for slow, steady, long-term growth. So it depends on when you plan to retire. You know, there were people who were wanting to retire when COVID hit, and then the market took a dive and their 401k accounts shrunk significantly. And there have been other times in history when this has happened. So they weren't able to retire. They said, well, I'm going to have to work a couple of years until the market recovers, rebounds from whatever loss, and when the value of it goes back up to what it was, then I can begin drawing on it. If you were, say you're 35 years old and you wanted to draw money out of the 401k early because you needed it for some emergency, you would have to pay a 10% penalty on the early withdrawal. Plus, whatever amount you took out would have to be added to your annual income so that it would be taxed, which is probably at least 15%. So you pay the 10% penalty, and then you pay 15% on the amount that you took. That adds up quickly. That's a lot. So I do not recommend that you take money out of it early unless you need like bail to stay out of prison or something like urgent like that. It's not worth it. It's very expensive to do so. All right. But a relatively decent vehicle nonetheless. Now, many employers do offer a 401k plan that you can contribute to. Usually now, I think it's a federal law that if the company offers a 401k plan, don't quote me on this, do the research, but I believe you are automatically enrolled in it. And that's just to encourage people to get into these plans and start saving. And then you can come back after the first month or two and say, yeah, I'm not interested, I don't want to belong, and they'll refund your money out of it. But if the company does offer a 401k, I believe it's federal law now, then you're just automatically enrolled in that when you begin working. So that is the 401k. However, not every company offers a 401k. Let's say maybe I work for a little machine shop over in Hearst where we make airplane parts and we only have a total of 15 employees. It's not a big enough entity to provide this 401k plan. They're not rich people. They're just a couple that owns the place, and they make obscure parts for airplanes, and it's a small shop. Mom and pop can't afford to give their 10 employees a 401k plan. They're not making tons of money. In those cases, you have the traditional IRA, which is very similar. So if I worked in that little machine shop and they didn't offer a 401k, that's okay. I can go to just about any bank and I can tell them I would like to open a traditional IRA. The traditional IRA is basically for people who work in companies where they don't offer a 401k plan. Here we have this for you as well. And it basically operates the same way. It's your account, it's in your name, you're responsible to fund it. One notable difference is that there will be no employer contribution. It's not offered by the employer. You just went to the bank and started the account there. So there's no matching contribution of any percentage of any kind on the traditional IRA, but better than nothing, right? So at least you have access to some account. And most banks offer one of these. I use Chase, I recommend Chase, but do your homework and come to your own conclusions. So all of the deposits that you make into the traditional IRA This is what's similar to the 401k, same thing. However much you put in a year, you can deduct from your adjusted gross income. If I put 10,000 a year in, that's 10,000 I don't have to pay income taxes on. So I get that little tax break. And identical to the 401k, when I turn around and retire, I declare retirement, and then I tell them I want distributions on it. I ask for $1,000 a month. I get a check for $840 because all the taxes are taken out of it when I collect it when I retire. So it's nice to get a little tax break when you're young. It encourages you to save more, and helps you save a little bit, but just know that's not forever. When you finally retire, then the government is going to make you pay taxes on it. And you're going to pay taxes on all of the money that you put in there, plus the 5 to 8% growth. It's all just one big package. Whatever money I put in and the growth, it's all taxable under one code. And so I will pay basically a payroll tax on it when I draw that out. Okay? Just like the 401k, the risk is held by the individual 100%. So if the market goes down, then the value of the traditional IRA will go down. If the market goes up, it may increase. Right? It's going to vary according to what the stock market is doing. Because just like the 401k, this is also filled with mutual funds and stocks and bonds and all kinds of different investment vehicles, long-term investment vehicles. Okay. So here's another notable difference. The maximum contribution is not $23,500 a year. With the traditional IRA, I don't know why this is, but the maximum contribution is only $7,000 a year. So, a lot easier to reach the maximum, that would be the bright side of it. But it's only about a little less than a third of what you could put into the 401k, but nobody puts that much in a 401k. Right? So $7,000 a year is going to be enough to get you going and get a retirement account started for yourself. You're not getting that matching deposit from an employer, but it's still a pretty good deal. It's basically a carbon copy of the 401k plan without the matching contribution of the employer and a much smaller limit, maximum limit. The catch-up amount on this, I think it was $1,000, don't quote me on that. I wouldn't know, so I'm nowhere near 50. And so you could put, let's say, $8,000 a year into this thing, which would help you get caught up if you started it late or something like that, which is a lot of people find themselves in that situation. So that's the traditional IRA. And then lastly, is the Roth IRA. And Roth IRA is another carbon copy. It's modeled after the 401k and the traditional IRA. So just like the traditional IRA, you would go into a bank, let's say Chase, for example, and you would say, I'm going to start an IRA. And would say, do you want traditional or do you want Roth? If you chose the Roth, everything would be virtually identical to the traditional. The maximum contribution is the same. It's funded by you 100%. You can, well, we'll get to the taxes in a second. This account is held and maintained and managed by the bank where you take it out, so you're fully responsible for it, et cetera, et cetera. The difference between the traditional IRA and the Roth IRA is this. Any money that I put into this fund, I can't deduct from my taxes. So if I'm putting $10,000 a year into my Roth IRA, or I should say $8,000 a year would be the maximum, if I were over 50, which I'm not, then $8,000 would come off of my tax burden in a traditional, but not in the Roth. So maybe you're thinking to yourself, well, why in the world would I want to contribute to this one when I'm not getting any benefit of being able to reduce my tax burden? Would it be better to reduce the tax burden in a traditional? Perhaps. The difference is when I retire and I tell them I'm now officially retired and I want to take distributions from my Roth IRA and I want $1,000 a month, I don't get $840 in all kinds of deductions. I get $1,000 a month because I've already paid the taxes on all the money that's in there. You understand? I didn't get a tax break when I deposited money in the way that I would have in the traditional or in the 401k. Therefore, when I retire, I don't owe any taxes on it. I funded it with money out of my paycheck that was left over when I already paid tax on all the income in that paycheck. That's it. I got no deduction, no immediate benefit from it. However, when I retire and I don't have as much income, at least I don't have to worry about paying taxes on it. Okay? So the main difference between traditional and Roth IRA is just where you are taxed. Tax rate when you deposit it in the traditional, no tax rate when you deposit it in the Roth. However, distributions from the traditional, I will pay an income style tax on that, but distributions from the Roth are tax-free, which is really nice. Now, that's not all of it, because if I have a 401k or a traditional IRA, and I get a tax break on all the money that I put in there, but when I draw it out, then I have to pay the payroll tax on it. Remember, I'm paying taxes on all of the money that I put in there through my 30 years of working, plus the 5 to 8% growth a year. It's all part of the same pie that they want to slice of. However, and this is the real difference, with the Roth IRA, I don't pay any income taxes when I get distributions on the money I put in or the 5 to 8% growth. That's the real difference. So not only are my contributions tax-free, but the growth every year, the growth on it, and that's amazing, but they're still allowing this actually. The growth is also not taxed. That's the real difference. It's not just that the tax burden is reversed on them the way most people think. It's actually better than that, because not even the growth in this thing is taxed. So if it grew 5 to 8% over 30 years, maybe I've got a couple $100,000 in there, you could look at tens of thousands of dollars worth of growth in there, and that is also exempt from taxes. So personally, my opinion as an unlicensed financial advisor who's just here to give you information about these accounts only, I would strongly recommend that you start a Roth IRA. It's the best vehicle. May as well pay the taxes and be done with it now. You can live without the tax break. You're young, you'll bounce back from it. It's not urgent. And at least that way, when you retire, you don't have to worry about paying taxes on all that money that you put in there, or the growth, which again is the real difference. So far and away, my opinion is that this is the best plan, the Roth IRA. And it seems like every semester someone will come up to me on campus and will say, Mr. M, I want to let you know I started a Roth IRA. If you do it now, maybe you're not in your forever job because you're going to school and you're working part-time. But I would say, go ahead and start it anyway. Maybe you can only put $15 a month in. And even that's like, geez, again, another $15? Because you still make that much money. Who cares? Get the thing open, start putting money in there now, and then when you get your bachelor's degree, then you go to graduate school and you finish all your graduate work, and now you're looking for your forever job and you land it, the account is already open, and you've had it for several years. And so now all you have to do is go in there and say, oh, I want to increase the contribution now because I have a much better job and I can really start funding this thing. If you don't do that, if you wait, if you say, it's not worth it, I'm not going to put $15 a month into this thing, it's not going to add up to anything, why bother? I'll wait until I get my forever job. If you do that, you are much more likely to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to put that on the list. You get your forever job now, and you're like, oh, I can get a better apartment, now I can afford a car payment, I can take my significant other out on the weekends, we can improve our lifestyle. I want to enjoy this a little bit before I start putting a bunch of it in savings, right? I'll get to that. Do you have any idea how many people I talked to who were younger than myself at UBS that I encouraged to start a Roth IRA? And it was always the same thing. Yeah, I just got this full-time job driving the truck and making good money. I'm definitely going to look into that. I'm going to get to it. You're right. And they never do. Never do. Because it's a pain in the neck. Now they got to take a half a day off of work. They got to go around the bank. They got to fill out all the paperwork. They have to think about it. They have to fund it, all that mess. If you already have started the account when you're young, then when you do get the forever job in 4 years, in 5 years, however long it takes, then all you have to do is go on to the bank account and increase the contribution. Done. It'll take you 45 seconds. But if you haven't opened it, you're much more likely to say, oh, yeah, I'm going to get to it. It's on the list. I just want to spend some of this first. I've been so long and long without it. I'm a struggling college student, and I just landed the job that I want. It's definitely on the list to get done this year, but you probably won't do it. However, those people who have started it and it's there, it's much easier. Yeah, you know what? It takes me 45 seconds. I'm in here looking at my checkbook anyway. I'll increase it a little bit now. Maybe I'll increase it. I would strongly suggest that, and my strategy was to get it to the maximum contribution, $7,000 a year, as quickly as I could. You're allowed to have multiple vehicles. So, for example, I worked at UPS and I had a pension, very, very lucky. Most people don't have those. And I also contributed to a Roth IRA. It's not like one or the other. You can have both. I actually have a traditional IRA as well. So I have a few different things. And if you can afford to, it's always good to do that because, you know, some people think that Social Security will be there when you retire. At best, it's probably going to be a safety net and might prevent you from camping out in an alley and living on cat food. But it's not like I go golfing 3 times a week money and I'm enjoying my retirement. Social Security will never provide that. Especially by the time any of us get there, especially you, you'll be lucky if there's anything left. It may be completely insolvent. They may say, well, sorry, you can start collecting it when you're 80 if you live that long. I mean, it's worse and worse the more we go into debt, but that's a different lecture. The other advantage of a Roth IRA is that you can sort of borrow money from it for 60 days. So like, let's say something happened, I needed $5,000 for a down payment on a car, and I didn't have it. It would take me a month to scrape that up somehow, and I need the car now. I could take the money out of my Roth IRA, so it sort of functions as a, they don't call it a loan, but it functions as a loan. And I would not have to pay any penalty, and I would not have to pay any income taxes on it as long as I returned that $5,000 within 60 days. So in that way, you are able to access not the growth, but just the money that you put into it. You can take that out with no penalty of any kind, spend it for what you need, and as long as you return it within 60 days, everything's good. There's no penalty, you don't have to pay any income taxes on it, no nothing. It's like it never happened. So it sort of functions in a way where you can get a free loan for 60 days as long as you can pay it back. And sometimes that's necessary. You never know when you're going to need $5,000 to put down on a car or something like that. And if you have a Roth IRA and you had contributed at least $5,000 to it, then you can draw that out. And then as long as you return it within 60 days, no penalty, no interest. And the other accounts don't have that feature. Anything you took out of there would immediately be subject to a 10% early withdrawal fee, and you couldn't return it. You just have to add it to your income and now pay the income taxes on it, which could get significant quickly. So don't recommend that. And I try not to use it, but who knows? Who knows? Maybe you might. The other advantage is that there is a federal law, and this applies to make sure you do the homework. I believe it's both the 401k, the traditional IRA, and the Roth IRA, those 3, but I could be incorrect about that. About 90% sure it's right. They allow you to withdraw $10,000 from those accounts one time. No penalty, no 10% penalty, and you don't have to pay income tax on it either, as long as you are using it for a first-time home purchase. So if you were looking at the skyrocketing interest rates and wondering, like, how am I ever going to come up with a down payment for a home? That's a lot of money. I don't even know if I can come up with a down payment for a car at this point. How could I ever imagine coming up with enough for a down payment on a house? It just seems inconceivable. Well, that's one way. Start the retirement account, and then at least when you get that value over $10,000, the government will allow you to take it out and then use it as a down payment on your first home. That's what I did. And didn't have to pay it back, didn't have to pay a penalty on it, nothing. As long as it goes to the down payment on your first home purchase. One time, that's it. So that's another net benefit. Now, of course, all of these features of the 401k, traditional IRA, and Roth IRA, they're nice features. You know, the 401k traditional, I don't have to pay the taxes on it now, whatever I put in there, I take off my adjusted gross income every year. But I do have to pay the income taxes on it when I draw it out. Of course, the Roth is reversed, plus I don't have to pay any income taxes on the growth when I retire. However, all three of these really pale in comparison to the traditional pension plan. Most new pension plans will require the employer's going to want some contribution from you, so they're not as good as they used to be. When you go to work for UPS or some legacy company where they have these old legacy pension plans, you don't have to put a dime in, you don't have to think about it, you don't have to talk to a financial investor or advisor about it, you don't have to do anything. All you do is keep track of how many years you worked, and then you'll know exactly what you're going to receive in retirement. Okay? I think that about covers it for those 5 accounts. Are there any questions that I could answer? And I would strongly encourage you to think about going to a bank. I like Chase, but do your own research. And all you do is go in there and tell them, yeah, I want to start an IRA. And they'll say traditional or Roth. You say, I want to start a Roth. And usually it's like $100 or something that they would want to start the thing. It's a very small amount. And then they'll just want to know how much do you plan on putting in monthly, and usually it's any month, $5, $10, $15, whatever you can afford. And I really would strongly encourage you. I think it's such a smart thing to do now when you're young, then you've got it, you're already starting to build it up, and then by the time you get that forever job, now it's easy. You don't have to worry about taking time off to go research it, starting one and all that. Get that done now. And then you have it, you've got access to it, perhaps you have benefits if you're doing a Roth, borrow from it, borrow, as long as you can find that, etc. And that is my favorite way to come up with a $10,000 down payment for a house. It makes a huge difference. If not that way, what's the alternative? What's the other way that you're going to come up with $10,000 for a house, right? Yeah.
I'm a coin collector. I have several 1982 pennies worth that much.
Good. Yeah, that sounds like a much better investment, as long as you paid a very low amount for that. But I would still consider doing something like this because it never hurts, right? You probably can't get a free loan from those without selling them. So although they're a great asset, and I do encourage that as well, I'm not so much an old coin collector as I am a metals acquirer. So I like to own silver. Always good to own precious metals. Look at the long-term records on the value of these. Silver has gone up over time. Gold, I think, is about $4,000 an ounce right now. It just keeps skyrocketing. So if you can hold some precious metals, that's always a good idea, because if I own, hypothetically, if I owned a whole bunch of silver or a whole bunch of gold and had it in a safe deposit box somewhere, I'm never going to have to pay any income taxes on that. The government can't steal that which it does not know exists. Therefore, it's always a good idea, if you can afford to do so, to have some of your money invested in precious metals. And if I decided I wanted to cash out of those, hypothetically, if I had them, then I would simply go to a metals exchange and I would swap it for the cash. Done deal, transaction over. No taxes paid, no nothing. So, yes, sir.
Is it the bank that's investing your money, or do you have a say in where it's going?
In the 3 plans, traditional 401k and Roth IRA, it's the bank who is managing everything. And so they'll just suggest, like, this is probably the best plan. And, you might be, if you don't know a ton about this stuff, you might be better off letting them make those decisions until you know more about it. But they'll usually put you in a plan that they manage. You don't have to think about it. You'll get an annual statement. It'll show you how much you've deposited. And they'll give you regular pie charts on statements and show you how much it's grown, et cetera, et cetera. But unless you were really financially savvy and wanted to go in there because you thought you could do better than the bank was doing and you were going to fine tune it, I don't even do that myself. I let them handle all that stuff because they've been very good about it. They're good custodians of those accounts. I've never had an issue with them. They're legitimate banks. It's not like you're, going and dealing with a loan shark on the street or something where there's a unpredictability to that. You never know, lose a kneecap or something. But I know that Chase does allow me to go into that account if I wanted to and kind of tinker with it and change some of the allotments and investments. But I don't do that because my experience with them is that I trust them to make decisions more than myself. it's sort of complex with retirement accounts. I don't know enough to do that, so I let them handle it. Yeah, they've done a good job of handling it. Yep. Any other questions? It does seem like every semester somebody will find me in the yard. I'll hear, Mr. Evans, turn around, and then I turn around and they go, I just want to let you know, I started a Roth IRA account. I only got $150 in it, but at least I got started, like you said, and I'm working on it. I'm thinking about it. Good. I wish I heard that 20 times a semester from people. Because, you know, there's always a chance that things can go off the rails and the country collapses and you lose all your money in those accounts. But really, if the country collapses, the loss of money in your retirement accounts is going to be the least of your worries. There are much more important things to be concerned about at that point. So I think, in my opinion, it's safe, they're very low risk, they're long-term, they're durable. You really don't hear about too many people losing their behinds in these accounts, not unless they've worked for a company. There have been some exceptions where this is certainly something to be aware of. If the company offered a 401k, but the details of that 401k was that it was 90% funded by that company's stock, bad idea. Because the company goes bankrupt, you lose everything, right? That's probably illegal for them to do now because there have been some disasters and people have really paid the price. Right here in Texas, not too long ago, and I can't remember the name of the company, it escapes me at the moment, but there were a lot of people who lost everything. And it turns out they didn't realize the bulk of the stock that was in those plans was the company's own stock. So they were shoveling their own stock in there, and that made it look like it was being purchased on the market, which increased the value of the stock. And it's kind of this little funny game that the company plays. So I would say just be aware of that. But that's probably, I don't know if it's illegal or not. I hope that it is. So that'd be one thing to be careful of. Otherwise, this is it right here. Even though you're limited, even though it doesn't sound like, well, I'm not going to be a millionaire in 10 years, you'd be surprised. With the 5 to 8% growth, if you got started early, put as much in there as you could, got that contribution maxed out as soon as you possibly could, and continue to just put money in there every year. Every time I got a raise, yes, I'd take that amount, that would go directly into my Roth plan. I would never see it. I'm living on this amount, I'll keep living on this amount. I'll see it, I'm not going to miss it. And so that was a good way to increase the contribution, so I got it up to the maximum amount. You can do it too. Any other questions? Thank you very much. That concludes the presentation. Good luck to you.